From Hollywood, this is Casey Kasem. And entering Casey's Top 40 at number 39, here's our second debut. It's by a Canadian newcomer named Alanis Morissette, the song that's currently spending its fifth week at number 1 on the alternative rock chart. Here's Alanis Morissette with You Oughta Know.
I want you to know that I'm happy for you.
Casey's Top 40.
Hi, this is Casey Kasem. Canadian alternative rocker Alanis Morissette has her first hit in the USA, and it's a big one. The song is called You Oughta Know, and this week it rocked up 12 notches to number 21 to become our biggest mover. Now Alanis Morissette wants to keep on moving up the chart and score her first top 10. We'll find out if she does it as we count down all the biggest hits in the USA on Casey's Top 40.
Count them down with Casey Kasem.
I'm Casey Kasem on Casey's Top 40. Well, now we're up to the first Top 40 hit in the USA for Alanis Morissette, a hot new alternative rocker from Canada who was turned down by one American record company after another. That is, until her tapes arrived at the record company headed by Madonna. 21-year-old Alanis Morissette started recording when she was only 14. And in the early 90s, she was a teen star with a successful career making dance records in Canada. In fact, she was so successful that her debut album earned her a Juno Award as Most Promising Female. That's the Canadian equivalent of the Grammy. But Alanis wasn't happy making dance music. She wanted to record songs full of meaning. She wanted to rock and roll. So a few years ago, she packed up her things and headed south for Los Angeles, where she felt there was, quote, a potency I wanted to tap into. Through a friend of a friend, she got together with veteran producer Glenn Ballard, a man who had worked with Wilson Phillips and Michael Jackson. Together they recorded an album in Glenn's home studio. It was exactly what Alanis wanted, music that was spontaneous and raw, vocals that were cut in just a single take. After the album was complete, they started taking it to one record company after another. And one after another, the companies gave them the same polite response. Thanks, but no thanks. Then one day they took their tapes to Maverick Records, a label Madonna had set up to expose exciting new artists with exciting new sounds. Well, when the folks at Madonna's label heard the album Alanis Morissette had made, they loved it. They were particularly impressed by her unique voice and the uncommon honesty and sexual edge of the songs. And with the approval of Madonna, they quickly signed Alanis and put out her album. To date, that album, titled Jagged Little Pill, has sold over 1 million copies. And this week, the first single from that CD moves up 2 notches to number 15 on Casey's Top 40. Here's Alanis Morissette and You Oughta Know.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. That means we're up to the number 1 song in the USA on Casey's Top 40, and it's by a Canadian singer who has a great relationship with her twin brother, a relationship she says is positively cosmic. His name is Wade, and they were born 21 years ago in Ottawa. As with most twins, they're very close, not just in the way they look, but also in their feelings. The singing star says that when they were going to elementary school, there were times when one of them would fall and get hurt, and the other would know it and actually feel the pain. And sometimes when one of them would come down with a cold, the other would start sneezing too. That feeling of closeness between the twins continues today, even though Wade still lives in Canada and the singer has moved to L.A. She says if she feels a bit down, somehow from over 1,000 miles away, Wade knows it and gives her a call. And he also gives her a call when things are good, as he did when she won big at the Grammys this year, and when a track from her multi-million selling CD, Jagged Little Pill, became the biggest hit in the land. The number 1 song in the USA on Casey's Top 40 for the 4th week in a row is Ironic by Alanis Morissette.
Casey's Top 40.
That means we have a brand new number 1 song in the USA this week on Casey's Top 40, and it's by the very first Canadian to ever score 2 number 1s in the same year. Ever since the beginning of the rock era, Canadian artists have done well in the USA, and over the years, quite a number of them have hit the top of the pop chart. Among the Canadians who hit number one in the 50s and 60s were Paul Anka and Percy Faith. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we've had number one songs by Canadian artists like The Guess Who, Gordon Lightfoot, Bryan Adams, and Celine Dion. But even though some of those artists hit number one more than once, none of them did it in a single year. That distinction belongs to the alternative rocker who sings this week's number one. Like some of the Canadians who hit number one in the USA, her first success came in her native land. She was a teenage pop and disco star there, but after she moved to L.A., she changed her style. And when she released her American debut, the CD Jagged Little Pill, it became a sensation on alternative rock stations. Soon that success spread to other stations as well, and Jagged Little Pill has gone on to sell over 9 million copies. In April of this year, a track from that CD, the song Ironic, went all the way to number one on the pop chart. And now, another track has done it as well, making this 22-year-old singer the only Canadian to ever hit number one twice in the same year. The brand new number one song in the USA on Casey's Top 40 is You Learn by Alanis Morissette.
Casey's Top 40.
Well, now we're up to the number one song in the USA on Casey's Top 40, and it's by a star who's been on the road for so long, she dreams about finally having a day where all she has to do is sit by the ocean and talk to her imaginary therapist. This Canadian woman has been on the road for nearly 18 months. She says she's played so many shows to so many audiences that on any given day, she has no idea where she is anymore. And though she loves performing, she'd also love to get her life back. A life that she's idolized in an ongoing daydream about not having anything to do. In this daydream, this Grammy winner says everything is very simple. She says, quote, I'd sit by the ocean, I'd have a really good book nearby, I'd have a puppy by my side. I'm alone, except that I'd also have a therapist-type figure who I could call upon if there was some issue I was grappling with. They'd appear when I wanted them to, and then they'd disappear, and I'd be alone again. That would be a perfect day. Well, unfortunately, it's a day this singer may have to wait for, because the more she hits the top of the chart, the more in demand for concerts she becomes. And it's at the top that she finds herself once again with the biggest hit in the land. The number one song in the USA on Casey's Top 40 for the second week in a row is Head Over Feet by Alanis Morissette.
Casey counts them down.
And that means we're up to the brand new number one song in the USA on American Top 40. It's by a star who said she'd probably be singing in Hungarian today had Soviet tanks not rolled into the land of her parents in 1956. This young singer-songwriter was born and raised in Ottawa, Canada. She says that her family wound up living in Canada not because it was the land they'd long dreamed of moving to, but because they were among 200,000 refugees who fled a revolution in their native land of Hungary. You see, back in 1956, long before she was born, a reform movement swept through Hungary. Since 1947, the Hungarian government had been aligned with the Soviet bloc, but this movement wanted Hungary to be a neutral country with open borders and an end to censorship. On October 23, 1956, a new government announced those reforms. On November 4th, Soviet troops marched into Hungary to crush that government, and 200,000 Hungarians fled to other countries to avoid the coming repression. This singer's parents were among them. They wound up emigrating to Canada, and it was in Canada that this future superstar grew up, speaking Hungarian at home but English with her friends and at school. And it was in Canada that she had her very first success, winning a Juno Award for Most Promising Female Artist. Since then, she's hit big here in the States. Her debut CD, Jagged Little Pill, sold over 15 million copies, and she scored 6 top 10 hits, 3 of which went all the way to number one, including the song that this week is the biggest hit in the land. The brand new number one song in the USA on American Top 40 is Uninvited by Alanis Morissette.
Casey's Coast to Coast.
I'm Casey Kasem. We're counting down to the number one song in the USA. 6 years ago this week, back in 1998, this was the song at number one. It's by Canadian Alanis Morissette, who spent 3 of her preteen years living in West Germany. She says her main connection to her home was the music she listened to.
America's top hits.
This week back in 1996, one of the top hits in the USA was Head Over Feet. It's by a star who says she goes into sort of a trance when she writes her songs. When they're finished, she has no recollection of having written them at all. Alanis Morissette says it's the strangest thing. Quote, I don't remember writing any of the songs on my albums. I don't know where You Ought to Know came from. I don't know where Hand in My Pocket came from. I'd read the words the day after I wrote them and I'd go, wow, who wrote that? This woman says as far as she can tell, when she sits down to write a song, she leaves her body and her pen just starts moving across the paper. When she comes back to her body, the words are there. Well, whoever writes the songs, they're good ones. And this week, back in 1996, one of them was one of the top hits in the USA. Alanis Morissette with Head Over Feet.
Count